The next speaker is Mr. Zuckerman, and after Mr. Zuckerman, Mr. John Rubin. Morning, Tom.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Council. I am Tom Zuckerman, representing the Central Delta Water Agency. My first purpose today is to verify that you've actually received the comments and are considering them from the agency that were submitted in writing. And if I can verify that, I can shorten my comments rather. The ones that you mailed? Yes.
Gentlemen,
yes.
You're communicating with each other. Would you please identify letters by either a date, or both of you nod or say yes at the same time that you know what you're talking about for the record?
Mr. Ray has answered my question in the affirmative. I was referring to the documents that were forwarded within the deadline last week.
All right. Good. Mr. Ray from the Delta Council staff acknowledges receipt of those documents. Thank you.
And my comments really are today that I think it's important that you consider those comments seriously. They make several suggestions for amendments to the regulations. They point out what we consider to be rather obvious inconsistencies between the proposed regulations and existing law. There are more or less self-canceling provisions in your authorizing legislation and in those regulations that talk about not being inconsistent with existing water rights law in California and so forth and so on, which render the regulations that you're proposing to adopt somewhat ambiguous because, as we point out, many of them are or appear to be directly inconsistent with laws that you purport not to be interfering with. And it's important that your actions be as clear as possible. I think the gentleman from East Bay Mud addressed more or less the same issue, and I think you need to go back through what you're proposing to do and make either declare your intention to be in conflict with the laws that we've cited in our comments, or correct your regulations so that they are not. By and large, the other general criticism I think that we are making, to put it into the context of Super Bowl and all that, is you appear to be running interference for some things that you purport not to be doing directly. And that is you're creating a blocking path for both the flow regulations from which you anticipate getting from the State Water Resources Control Board and the environmental proposals that you anticipate getting from the BDCP. I think both of those actions are really inappropriate here. The actions of the State Water Resources Control Board can stand on their own. The BDCP is going to have to stand on its own as well, and appears to be flailing around in that regard. So I realize it tends to make your plan or your regulations look a little bit more complete, but I think it's inappropriate the way you've approached that. Finally, what I'm going to urge you to do is to step back from this process a little bit. Try to collect yourselves as to where the whole process is going. I've talked to you about near-term actions in the past. I've talked to you about loading too much of the burdens of the correction of the Delta thing on the Delta itself, upon the people that live there, upon the people that work there, upon the businesses that are conducted there, and on the fish and wildlife that live there. And really, in sum, what you're doing is, and I think others have addressed this, you're making it more difficult for people who are trying to carry out their responsibilities in the Delta by imposing additional requirements, another level of review and so forth on it. And in particular, I would refer to the many times I have sat here and talked to you about the efforts of the people in the Delta to generate flood control projects. it really is going to be much more difficult for us to carry out those proposals under our efforts under the proposals that you are making. And I don't think that's in your best interest, in my best interest, or anybody else's best interest. We've made remarkable progress on flood control in the Delta. We're trying to do every day, try to improve that, and to put a bunch of criteria in there that would be new and would be burdensome, I think, is a horrible mistake at this time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them, but other than that, I am
Thank you,
through.
Mr. Zuckerman.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.